Hi, I'm Mark, and today I want to talk about Brexit again. What a surprise! Because 7 years after the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, the impact of Brexit continues to be felt across many sectors, from entertainment to migration. Not only what we here call king football, but also the games industry, TV productions, and filmmakers are still faced with a variety of challenges caused by Brexit, which in some cases can also become opportunities for those involved, though. Some sectors are happy about the influx of skilled workers, while others complain of a brain drain. And even king football is no exception to this. Brexit has led to great uncertainty among both football clubs and players. Before Brexit, players from EU countries could move to the various clubs in the UK without a big transfer, but there are currently stricter eligibility criteria. And this fact has made it more difficult for British clubs to sign players from the EU. And Brexit has also had an impact on the gaming industry, particularly in relation to privacy. Previously, the EU General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, governed data protection in the UK, but since the UK left the EU, this is no longer the case. The UK now has its own data protection regulations, which, while similar to the GDPR, still have some notable differences. And this has led to confusion, particularly among game operators, as to whether they, as UK companies in this entries, can continue to operate in the EU, as they may need to comply with both EU and UK data protection rules. And this can also cause UK players to have trouble accessing online games and platforms that are based within the European Union. Brexit has also raised massive concerns in the television and film industry, especially with regard to international co-productions. Before February 1st in 2020, the UK could participate in the EU's Creative Europe programme, which funded co-productions between EU countries. Post-Brexit, the UK will no longer be eligible for Creative Europe funding, making it significantly more difficult for UK producers to obtain financial support for co-productions with EU countries. Losing access to the EU single market has also made it more difficult for British producers to distribute their shows and films across the EU. This has also led to a decline in co-productions between the UK and the EU, which could have long-term implications for the industry. Brexit also made it cumbersome for British actors and actresses, but also for everyone in crew, to work in the EU due to new work permit requirements, but this also applies to European cultural workers in the UK. Things are a bit different in the gambling industry. This has always been very strictly regulated in Great Britain. And even if you play free slot games, for example, you have to go through a so-called know your customer process in addition to an age verification. It is therefore not surprising that Brexit has presented the industry with regulatory challenges. Before Brexit, UK-based providers could operate in other EU countries under a variety of exemptions and mutual recognition. However, post-Brexit, the UK had to negotiate new agreements with each individual EU country to allow UK-based operators to continue operating there. Ultimately, this is not difficult because the rules within the EU resemble a patchwork quilt. That is why some providers based in Great Britain have moved to other EU countries in order to put their offer online from there. And the music industry was also influenced in many ways by the political decisions. The industry relies heavily on moving goods, including musical instruments. And post-Brexit, many British musicians now require a visa to tour the EU and vice versa. And this has made touring more complicated and expensive, especially for independent artists who may need more revenue to cover additional costs. And Brexit has also affected the ability of UK-based music festivals to book EU artists and vice versa due to work permit requirements. And the fashion industry relies heavily on international trade and supply chains, which have been disrupted by Brexit. For example, many UK-based fashion companies have to pay additional taxes and duties when importing or exporting goods to EU countries. Some companies have even relocated their manufacturing operations to EU countries to avoid additional costs. For this reason, Brexit has also affected the ability of UK-based models to work in the EU due to work permit requirements. And of course, the same goes the other way all the time. The video game industry is another entertainment sector affected by Brexit. The industry relies heavily on talent from across the EU and beyond, and Brexit has made it more difficult for UK-based game developers to recruit and employ staff from the EU. And this could lead to a brain drain, with talented people leaving the UK for other EU countries where they will find better job opportunities. And Brexit has had a far-reaching impact on various entertainment industries, from, as I said, from football to gambling, TV production and feature films to the video game industry and more. While some of these impacts were foreseeable, others came as somewhat of a surprise to all involved, and it remains to be seen how the full impact of Brexit will play out over the next few years. The migration movements will be particularly exciting. And in 2022, the gross domestic product in Great Britain was around 3.07 trillion US dollars. For 23, the GDP is forecast to be around 3.16 trillion, which could set a new high. But with a view to current forecasts for the development of GDP in 22, Great Britain is forecast to have a high growth rate in comparison with other European countries. Nevertheless, economic growth will continue to be influenced by Brexit and the associated loss of access to the European internal market and lack of compensation. The total trade volume between the UK and the EU has already fallen significantly. As of January 1st in 21, the United Kingdom lost access to the EU single market and is now treated as a third country, including the associated tariff restrictions. And industry in the UK continues to show no signs of growth. The Purchasing Managers Index from S&P Global fell only slightly by 0.1 points to 47.8 points in April, as S&P announced in London on Tuesday. With less than 50 points, the much-noticed indicator again points to economic shrinkage. However, the result is slightly better than the first estimate that was published a few weeks ago. The slowdown in UK manufacturing continued in the second quarter, S&P commented. Production and new orders have declined, and on the other hand, there was positive news from the supply chains. Delivery times had reduced in the past 3 months. That was said by S&P as well. The development helped to reduce the upward pressure on prices in the raw material sector, at least. And Brexit is a gift that keeps on giving, and that's why I was surprised myself that I haven't thought about this earlier, to have a Brexit game on my Outside Views Games channel. The Brexit game there will be out on May 15th. So if you haven't looked at the Brexit on the Outside Views game channel yet, have a look there. There are already 4 videos there and 4 different games with different topics. I'll see you there. I'll be back.